Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Russell Matthews here, and with the new year coming and the crazy year we've had over the past 12 months, it's pretty easy to get overwhelmed and caught up in the constant new news stories. I know that I personally can definitely be guilty of this, and as a result, we can quickly forget what our own goals and plans are. But for now, I'm going to ask you to be selfish, just this once for yourself, just for 10 minutes. Because today we're going to talk about exactly what it would take to retire by the age of 40, no matter how much money you make, and no matter what age you're starting from. Now, if you're watching this and you're already over the age of 40, or if you're younger and you have more aggressive retirement goals, don't worry, this video is still for you. And that's because with the tools and strategies I'm going to show you today, you're going to be able to figure out how you can retire by any age in any amount of years. Because after all, the whole point of this channel is to bring info to people about their money and how they can set themselves up to live a more financially stable future. So if you're interested in hearing tips like that, make sure to hit all of those buttons down there, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. I'm bringing updates like this all the time. Now, it's no secret that if you go on the internet, you're going to get a ton of different opinions. And the same goes if you're to ask a financial planner. It seems like if you were to ask 100 people what their thoughts are on this, you'd get 100 different answers. And with all of these conflicting viewpoints, it might seem like there's no way to truly know when you have enough for yourself to be able to retire. But it's actually a lot more simple than people make it out to be, and it all comes down to just two factors. The first one is how much money you make, and the second one is how much money you spend. Now, if you have any sort of control over these two factors, which I tend to think that you do, at least to some extent, then you actually have the ability to control when you'll be able to retire. Let me explain. The first step is to take these two numbers, that's your yearly income and also your yearly spending, and use them to find out what your yearly savings rate is as a percentage. Now, at this point, if you don't know how much you spend in a year, that's something I really recommend you taking a look at to figure out what that number is for you. In the past, we've talked about services like Mint.com or You Need a Budget that will sort of automate your spending by linking all of your accounts together to tell you how much you've spent over the past year. Now, in order to calculate what your yearly savings rate is, it's really super simple. All you have to do is take your yearly earnings and subtract your yearly spendings and divide all of that by your yearly income. And this will give you your savings rate as a percentage. As an example, if you make $50,000 a year and you spend $40,000 a year, that will leave you with a 20% savings rate. And by using this percentage, you can actually calculate exactly when you'll be able to retire based on your current numbers. To look at the extremes, if your savings rate is 0% and you're spending just as much as you're bringing in, or even in a worst case, you're spending more than you're bringing in, then you will never be able to retire because you'll have to continue to work to pay for all of the expenses if your spend rate is that high. And on the flip side, if you have a savings rate of 100%, you're able to save all of the money you bring home and you're somehow able to live for free, then of course you could retire right now because you don't have anything you need to spend money on. However, of course, most people are going to find themselves in the middle of these two extremes somewhere, and that's actually where it gets a little bit more complicated to calculate. Luckily, there's this great tool that I've been using that I'm going to show you. Let's take a look at it. This website is called Networthify, and I'll give you a link to this exact calculator down there in the description. But the beauty of this calculator is that if you know your income and you know your savings rate, then it will be able to tell you down to the 10th of a year when you should be able to retire. Now, this calculator actually uses a couple assumptions in order to make it a little bit more accurate. The first one that we're going to talk about is the fact that it's assuming that you're putting your savings into an investment account and you're actually able to earn 5% on your investments. Now, this is something that is actually pretty plausible, and we've talked about it in length, especially if you were to create a TFSA self-directed investment account. Again, I've got a video for that, so if you're interested in setting up that sort of account, you can check out the link down in the description too. Now, the end goal, which is retirement, is basically saying that your return on your investment, or the money that your money is making you, is enough to sustain your current expenses. So all of the money your investments are making will pay for all of your living expenses. When your yearly return on your investment is equal to or even greater than your yearly expenses, that's when you can sort of sustainably retire and you've reached that point of financial independence. So for example, let me show you how this works. Let's say that we're making $60,000 this year, and let's say that we've figured out our savings rate, and right now our savings rate is at 30%. So just with that information, it can sort of calculate in here what your annual savings is and what your annual expenses are if you already have that savings rate. And by clicking crunch the numbers, it will actually change this chart down here, which it just did, and it says at this rate, you can retire in 28 years, and you have that savings rate of 30%. So in other words, what this example is saying is that after 28 years of being at this 30% savings rate, with your investments earning 5%, then your return on your investment on a yearly basis will be higher than your expenses, meaning that you can retire. This is something that you can pretty easily plug your own numbers into to figure out how long at your current rate with your current numbers it would take for you to be able to retire like this. If you put in your numbers and you see a number that you're happy with and you're like, okay, I can retire at that time, that sounds great to me, then awesome. Keep up the good work and keep going along with that plan. It sounds pretty good. But if you're like most people who are first introduced to this sort of thinking, maybe that number isn't so satisfactory to you and it doesn't really align with when you're hoping to retire. Now, if this is the case, all you have to do is take a look at those two numbers that we talked about at the beginning of the video. That's your income and your savings rate, or how much you spend in a year versus your income. By either moving that income number up or by moving that spending number down, your retirement age can dramatically decrease. Let me show you how. Here's a different example. Let's say you're 25 years old and you make $50,000 a year and you're doing great and you're able to save 40% of that. So from your $50,000, you're spending $30,000 and are able to save $20,000. When we get the calculator to take a look at this and we crunch the numbers, we can scroll down here and it tells us that, okay, we can retire in 21.6 years. So if you're 25 and this is the number that you get, then that brings you to around 46 years old as your age of retirement. Not too bad, right? But if the current numbers that you put in here don't satisfy you, what you can do is you can actually scroll along this scale and figure out how many years you actually want to spend and what savings rate you would need to have in order to retire by that age. So for this example, we're saying we're 25, and let's say we want to retire by the age of 40. That would mean that we'd have 15 years as our maximum amount of time it can take for us to retire. So if we scroll down here, yep, we find one that you can see here. It has 14.9 years. And so in order for us to retire after 14.9 years, or in other words, 15 years, bringing us to that age of 40 from 25, we need to target a savings rate of 54% per year. In order to increase your savings rate from that first example where they're retiring at 46 to the second example where they're retiring at 40, it amounts to saving an extra $7,000 per year. By saving and investing that extra $7,000 per year, they've shaved 6 years off of their working life. And when you start to think of things in these terms, it really puts things into perspective, like what's most important to you. Do you want to prioritize saving this so that you can retire early and maybe spend more time with family and be around more, right? Or maybe it's not as important to you to do that and you're happy working longer because you love your job. This is just a tool to help you think about your future plans. And that's just it. You can use this tool with your own personal numbers and sort of click around on that chart to figure out, okay, if I have this amount for my savings rate, when can I retire? And figure out what's realistic and what's something you think that you could actually do. But I think that one of the biggest takeaways by looking at this sort of tool is that when we think about our investments, we're often thinking of the wrong number. We're so fixated on how much interest we can make on our investment, whether it's 5%, 6%, or 7%. But thinking of things in this different way shows you that it's actually far more powerful to focus on your savings rate and how much you can actually initially invest from the start that will have the biggest impact on when you can retire. And of course, in other videos, we've talked all about how you can increase this savings rate for you. I always recommend focusing on that, the higher expenses that you're experiencing in your life, and that's usually housing. If you can bring that number down, you can save a lot more, even more so than making smaller cuts in other areas, which also works too, but I just think it's a better idea to focus on those large expenses first. But I do recognize that often these things are easier said than done, and these calculations don't even really account for any increase of expenses that you may have later in your life, right? Like maybe you're planning on starting a family and you want to be able to support them. Of course, your expenses are going to go up, and that's going to change your individual calculation. Though at the very least, this is a great tool that you can look at each and every year and sort of account for the different things that have changed in your life, just so you can make sure that you're on track to meet those goals that you want to personally meet for yourself. So I hope that this is something that you'll be able to use personally, and it will be able to help you out a little bit. And if you found any value in this video, make sure to hit the like button down there, along with the subscribe button and the notification bell, because I'm constantly coming up with updates whenever there's any news that you need to know about your money, or other tips just like this one that could help you and your family live a more financially stable future. And with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video has helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.